This is Doug DeMuro, and today I'm going to talk about supercars, hypercars. There are so many new supercars and hypercars and ultra cars. I don't know what people call them. I just find myself not as excited about these cars as I was when I was a kid, which is funny because I have 3 supercars myself. I'm clearly into these cars, but I'm just not into the new supercars. So what's wrong? Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. Cars and Bids has around 600,000 registered users, all excited to bid on and buy special cars like this and this and this and this. So, if you're looking to sell your enthusiast car, do it on Cars and Bids and reach a huge audience. Okay, so I started to think about this topic. Why am I not into the supercar? I've been thinking about it for a while, but I started to really focus on it a couple of weeks ago when someone posted an Instagram comment to me. I posted a picture of my Ford GT and someone commented and said, when are you going to get the new Ford GT? And I thought about it for a second and just it's a laughable idea to me. I was thinking to myself, there is no chance. And I replied to that comment and I said something like, I have absolutely zero personal interest in the new Ford GT, which is true. And some people were like, but you reviewed it so well, you reviewed it so positively that you don't like it? Well, and it's not that I don't like it. I think it's a fantastic car, actually. For the market segment they were going after, I think it did great, which has been proven by its values, which have been strong. As a car reviewer, I recognize that it's awesome, but it doesn't excite me. On a personal level, it doesn't excite me. And I think I can draw that conclusion with the Ford GT to a lot of other modern supercars and hypercars. And so I started to think about why. Why is it that it doesn't excite me? Why is it that I'm not interested in the new Ford GT and all of its hypercar, modern hypercar brethren? So I've got it boiled down to a rather long list, actually, of things that really don't get me excited about new supercars. And we'll start with, to me, what the biggest thing is, which is there are so many cars today that cost $3 million. There are just dozens of cars available on the market today that cost $3 million, or 2.5 or 2.7 or 1.9 or whatever it is, but millions of dollars. And I remember when there was just one, and it wasn't long ago, 20 years, the Veyron came out, it crossed the $1 million mark, and it was like sacrilege. I can't believe someone's gonna charge $1 million for a new car. It had never happened before. Prior to that time, the only $1 million cars that actually transacted were all vintage Ferraris and very special old cars, Mercedes. But here was a brand new car at $1 million. It was a huge deal. And suddenly now there's a glut of them. And when you have 25 cars on the market or something like that cost $3 million, $2 million, $1 million, you lose kind of a specialness. The Veyron was special. It was going where no one had ever gone before. It was special when Ferrari made the F50. I remember seeing one as a kid in a shopping mall for some reason. There was this Ferrari tour that went around the country. It came to Denver where I was a kid, and they had it in a shopping mall. And I remember my dad took me down there, and I remember how excited I was to see an F50 as a 7-year-old. It was game changing. And I gotta be honest, as a 7-year-old today, I would look at this massive crop of hypercars and be like, I don't know, which ones are special? There's so many of these cars. When I was a kid, it was the F50. That was it. In the 90s, you dreamed of cars like the XJ220 and the EB110. Maybe there were 6 hypercars. Now there's 60. And there's just so many cars that do 0 to 60 in 2 seconds and have 1,000 horsepower and cost all this money. They just don't have the same special feel as they once did. A lot of people say Countach here invented the supercar. That was a huge deal in the 70s. A car that looked like this, drove like this. Ferrari had to come back with their own response in the Boxer, and it was sort of those two battling it out. Porsche wasn't there. Mercedes-Benz wasn't really there after the 300 SL. And it was just a very, very unusual, special, rare thing to imagine a supercar or a hypercar. Now, there's a lot of them. And adding to the non-special factor, something that really, I think adds to the feeling that these cars aren't special, is that they are basically all point-and-shoot automatic transmission, often hybrid or even electric cars. And so they don't really take I don't want to say they don't take skill to drive, because some of these things are so fast that they do require some skill. But I remember when these cars could kill you. I remember Carrera GT and Ford GT came out and they were getting involved in serious accidents, and it was like, wow, these cars are really scary. Like, they are cars that are at the limit of craziness. You needed to know what you were doing in order to drive one. These days, not only are there 25 hypercar options at $3 million, but anybody can just kind of get in, drive off, sometimes silently, and just go really, really, really fast. And it just doesn't, there isn't anything required. The cars still have a special driving feel, but there's nothing special about like the requirements of owning. There's nothing special about a Formula One derived engine in the Ferrari F50 or a full carbon fiber tub. This was a brand new, amazing space age technology in some of these cars. Now you just put a lot of batteries in it with a 12 zillion horsepower and you say go and it just sort of goes, and then the screens inside kind of do this cool thing, and that creates the drama that in the past just the sheer existence of a car like the F50 could create. Now, the other really important thing that goes along with the fact that there's too many of these cars and they're not all that difficult to drive is speed has become so accessible. When I was a kid, again, a supercar was the fastest car in the world. I mean, you know, your family sedans and your BMWs, they were all kind of angling to get higher and higher in the world, in the pyramid of car. But at the very top was the Murcielago, the F50, the F40, those cars. They were the fastest, 0 to 60, quickest, 0 to 60, fastest top speed. They were the cars everybody wanted. These days, a Model S Plaid, which you can buy used for $47,000, is the quickest accelerating car on the planet. And all these electric cars, a Kia EV6, a Kia crossover, does 0 to 60 faster than my Carrera GT. The acceleration has become not so special. And so the powertrains aren't that special, the cars aren't that special, and the speed that once defined these cars has kind of become not very special in itself. And furthering these cars don't feel as special kind of thought is the look of basically all these cars. And now the previous things that I've mentioned, I think, are somewhat objective relative to the previous age of supercars. This, though, maybe is a little bit more of me, old man, get off my lawn, but I don't think they look that special anymore either. I think the styling in a lot of these supercars has become a little bit derivative. Some of them are still crazy and insane and head-turning. The Aston Martin Valkyrie is amazing. I love the new Ferrari F80. I think it really does kind of bring the Ferrari supercar into the modern era in terms of the way it looks. But like, I just drove the Pininfarina Battista the other day, and it was really cool and really special, but it just didn't have a look like a $2.5 million car. And I think that's happening to more and more of these supercars. The SF90, the Ferrari SF90, which has been a car that we have really criticized a lot on my podcast and in some of my other videos, mainly because they overproduced it and resale values are absolutely plummeting. But that car just looks exactly like the Ferrari F8 and 290. I mean, it's just a Ferrari. It's not a really special car. Countach was a really special car. Ford GT was Bugatti Veyron when it came out. You saw that and you were like, holy crap, I can't believe I'm seeing this car. When I look at some of the supercars and hypercars today, the Rimac Nevera, I don't sit there and say, I can't believe I'm laying eyes on a Rimac Nevera. Now, the 12-year-olds who are young today may feel differently. And in 35 years, when they can afford these cars, they may actually covet the Rimac Neveras and the SF90s. But in my mind, there's just not the kind of specialness, the kind of aura around these cars that supercars used to have back when supercars were really, really rare. Another thing that I think is a real point to be brought up about these supercars and hypercars, and why I personally am not as obsessed with them as maybe I should be, is that a lot of them have become hybrid. Now, I don't have a problem with electric cars. In fact, I think for daily driving use, electric cars are fantastic. They really are. There's a lot of great benefits to them for just around town putzing. However, electric cars as supercars presents kind of an interesting situation. I don't fault the automakers for doing it, because electric power and propulsion has been able to give these cars amazing performance numbers that they couldn't have achieved with just straight gas powertrains. However, longevity kind of becomes a little bit of a concern when you're talking about electric cars. You're talking about battery technology, you're talking about, this plug-in hybrid stuff that's becoming outdated rather quickly. Some of the early hybrid supercars already are outdated and already are having full battery replacements at six-figure costs. I'm looking at you, McLaren P1. And that's a little bit Anxiety provoking, particularly because the supercars and hypercars, unlike the Tesla Model 3s and the Kia EV6, those are to an extent throwaway cars. Those are cars that people plan to drive, own, use up, and then they get scrapped. That's the Tesla Model 3's life, right? The F80, that will not be the case. Like every Ferrari F50 ever made is still around, more or less. Every F40, every Carrera GT, like a few have crashed completely, but most of these cars get preserved. In 35 or 40 years, is this plug-in battery hybrid technology really going to be operant or really going to make these cars capable? And then you look back at some of the simple stuff that's more computerless, that's kind of easier to figure out, and you think, okay, there's some benefits to these cars when the hybrids, when the full electrics are really like cutting edge today, but may not age in that way going forward. Now, to be fair, people have said this for years. When fuel injection came out, people were like, oh, fuel injection's carbureted cars will always be the standard, long-term fuel injection's not gonna work out. And they were wrong, right? Obviously they were wrong. It generally agreed, even today, fuel injection is more reliable, easier to understand, and most shops have kind of gone away from even working on carbureted cars. However, the point remains, these EVs are already getting expensive battery replacements. So this is already happening. It's not just me yelling at a cloud. This is already a thing that's going on. And so that makes me anxious about these cars that are intended to be preserved for a long time. Lastly, and again, I want to keep in mind, I want everybody to remember, I'm talking about my own personal taste here, why I am not interested in these hypercars. And actually, this really sums up all of the previous points in one point. The cars of today, the hypercars of today, with a few exceptions, like the Aston Martin Valkyrie that I just drove. That car is an exception, and there are a few others. The Gordon Murray car. But generally speaking, the cars of today, the supercars of today, I think just don't feel like cars that have a soul. They don't feel like cars that have this sort of emotional love bond with the driver and with all of the enthusiasts who look on Instagram and can't wait to see one or ride in one or hear one or even just see a Top Gear episode about one. The F40 felt like Enzo's soul was in it. The Countach had Gandini. The Ford GT had the whole of Ford Motor Company. It really felt like the most special thing this company could do. There was so much pride and soul in that car. The Veyron, you could feel Ferdinand Piëch in that car. The Carrera GT had its screaming V10. The Lexus LFA had its screaming V10. Those cars had passion. There was like a really serious fire about those cars. This sort of je ne sais quoi. You couldn't really identify what it was, but you knew this was a really special thing that you were seeing or thinking about or involved with or watching on Top Gear, on the Top Gear test track. What is the passion in a McLaren W1 or in a Rimac Nevera? To me, it doesn't have the same energy kind of as those cars do. What is the passion in another variant of the 720S or the 750S or the 765 LT or whatever? Like those cars are just so overdone. I've got McLaren fatigue. I don't feel passion in those cars. And I think that point is really a summation of all of the previous points that I made, which is there are a lot of these cars today. As a result, they don't really feel all that special. They don't really look all that special. Speed is easier. They're all point and shoot automatics. All of that stuff combines to create kind of less passion around this segment. And to be totally honest, I think there's also one other component that really keeps me away from the modern supercars and hypercars beyond the stuff I just said, and that's financial. If you look at these cars, they're not really holding value all that well. A lot of them. Some of them are, but a lot of them aren't. The SF90 is probably the very best example. Ferrari has realized there's a lot of hand raisers out there for these high-end Ferraris, especially because it gives them the opportunity to buy even higher-end Ferraris. And the result is they have overproduced SF90 and values are plummeting. I mean, we're talking about $100,000 every 6 months. And that is an unbelievable amount of money to lose in an automobile. And I'm not entirely convinced that the other hypercars and supercars will do any better. We're seeing the new Lamborghini Countach transact under the original sticker price. Pagani Huayras do not do incredibly well compared to the sticker price, whereas the Zonda, with its soul, with its passion, with its super limited production, is a much more desired car on the used market. New Ford GTs are starting to creep down. In fact, there have already been some new Ford GT sales that are starting to almost equalize with old Ford GT top of the market sales, and I have a suspicion that someday those cars will flip. Same with Countach. I think someday old Countach will overtake new Countach. There are so many of these cars that it's hard to really justify their continued production and existence when there are so many of these cars and the market just doesn't can't possibly have an appetite for 20, 30, 40 cars that cost over $800,000. And so you're seeing values plummet. And why would you be willing to see values plummet on a car that already has no soul, as I've identified before? Now, there are exceptions, like I said. Ferrari Daytona SP3, that car has soul, that car is special, that car is cool, but it's also an NAV12 with super limited production, and it looks insane. Like, I look at that car and I'm like, that is wow. The Aston Martin Valkyrie feels similar to that for me. The Revuelto, to me, kind of carries on the super Lamborghini tradition, which I like, but the really limited production, rich guy only super Lamborghinis like the Centenario and the Scion and the new Countach, those cars don't feel as special. Those cars feel like they were made just for rich guys to brag, whereas the Countach was made to be driven and later became a rich guy brag car as well. And so that's just kind of where I am with modern supercars. You might totally disagree with me, and that's totally fine. I'm just talking about personally, and I'll tell you, I am still very excited to review the new McLaren W1, to review all of these modern hypercars, the new F80, etc. But the question that I get is, why are you not personally going after these cars? Why are you not personally interested in them? And this is my answer to you. As a car reviewer, they make me excited. They have cool quirks. They're fast. They're fun to review. The videos do really well. That's always fun to see the response from the audience. But they just, as a personal car buyer, they just aren't my favorite thing. I prefer the old stuff with a soul. And by old, in some cases, I mean like 2010, like the Veyron went through like 2014. I love, that car had sold. Like, there's a lot of cars, even not that long ago, the Murcielago. It's not like I'm some purist for 60s cars or 80s cars, the carburetor, all that. I just don't think that the 1,000 horsepower hybrid automatic $2 million cars, of which there are now so many, is really my thing. I think a lot of these cars are coming out more and more to make rich guys feel special. And I just think that the historic stuff, the stuff that's already special and that already gives you that connection, is really where the specialness occurs. And so that's why I personally have kind of avoided the modern hypercars. There's your answer.